Straight ahead, heating up with early voting starting in about 3 weeks. We're focusing on the U.S. Senate race. We interview 3 of the candidates, Democrat Jasmine Crockett and Republicans Wesley Hunt, and the incumbent they want to defeat, Senator John Cornyn. Hello, I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas starts now. Welcome to Eye on Politics. While Texas has experienced an Arctic blast and winter storm, we're headed toward a political heat wave, at least when it comes to the U.S. Senate race here in Texas. We're about 3 weeks away from early voting starting for the March 3rd primary. In the race for the Democratic nomination, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's campaign released her new internal poll showing her leading Talarico by 13 percentage points, 46 to 33%. It comes after a recent independent poll showed her trailing Talarico by 9 percentage points. Crockett has been crossing the state on the weekends to campaign. I went one-on-one with her and I asked her about the polls and who the real frontrunner is.
I do believe that according to all polls, except for that one, that I am in the lead. But as you just said, we did 17 stops in 2 days where we went through, I think, a total of 6 cities. The following weekend, this most recent weekend, we did another, I think, 14 stops in 8 cities. So it doesn't matter what any poll says, we are going to work.
Your campaign also said that you are the best candidate in the Democratic primary to reassemble the Democratic base and to expand the electorate in November. What makes that so?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. When we look at the state of Texas, the state of Texas is a majority minority state. And so 61% of the state is people of color. But when we look at who is actually turning out to vote, it is Black and brown folk that are not showing up to the polls. Well, definitely African Americans overwhelmingly support me. I'm still in the lead with Latinos, and we know that my opponent has been spending a lot of money specifically to try to get Latinos to come over to his side. But considering the fact that we're already there, and so we already have a rapport, and then basically once we start spending our money, we will only continue to hopefully build upon that rapport.
How important is the electability issue for the general election in this primary? And I ask you that because I asked Representative Talarico that last week, and this is what he told me. I think it's the central question in this primary. Who can win in November? Every Democratic primary voter who shows up in this primary needs to have one question on their mind, and that is who is best positioned to win in November? Because if we don't win, we can't help people. So what do you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to win. And I'm the only person in this race that is ever polled ahead of any Republican. So I guess I won't necessarily disagree. And I've only been in this race for a little bit more than a month. Even in that flawed Emerson poll, and again, as I laid out how that poll was flawed, at the end of the day, that poll was skewed against me, yet I was actually still beating Ken Paxton in that poll. The best that my opponent, who's been in this race for some months now, the best that he was doing was tying with Ken Paxton. And that is still not considering all the people that typically don't vote. One of the things that we've got to do is we've got to figure out who can excite the base. And I think that that is what matters most when we're talking about electability.
Why should Democratic primary voters select you over him?
Yeah, so I think, number one, if we talk about experience, there's only one person in this race that has both state and federal experience, and that's me. But more importantly, it's a federal position. And so I think federal experience should be paramount. Again, so many people in our base are so upset and they keep asking questions like, well, what are y'all doing? What are you going to do? I think it is important to have somebody that you know exactly who they will be on the federal level, because there's been a lot of people that have thought that someone was going to be a certain thing on the federal level and they've been disappointed. Mind you, Mr. Fetterman is one of those types of people. People have been very disappointed with him. And I'm not saying that that would necessarily be the case with James Talarico. What I'm saying is that people don't know. You know exactly what you're going to get with me.
I want to ask you about a controversial statement that you've been asked about on the campaign trail. These are remarks you made to Vanity Fair in 2024, describing the way that some Latinos spoke about a tough illegal immigration policy. You called it the slave mentality. And you said, quote, "It's basically like I fought to get here, but I left y'all where I left y'all, and I don't want no more of y'all to come here." So what was your thought back then, and what is your message now when you are asked about this? And some people may have taken offense to this.
Yeah, so I've talked to a number of people, and I've talked to a lot of Latinos that have basically been like, we completely understood what you were trying to say in that moment. What I want people to understand is that the struggles of the African American community, as well as the Latino community, are greatly tied. It's the same thing, like for me, understanding our history, when I talk about the fact that what I see from ICE right now looks like slave patrols. As an African American woman, what I am doing is I'm framing things in the frame of thought that I can associate them with. And honestly, I think that there's more that unites Latinos and African Americans than divides us. And they continue to try to divide us, even trying to take that particular statement out of context, when the reality was, these are real conversations. No one is saying, oh, the Congresswoman did not have these conversations. There has been a real fear for a lot of people as it relates to immigration. And I was engaging in very real conversations.
If I heard you correctly, comparing the ICE patrols to slave patrols. Some people may hear that and say that's way too strong. You don't think so?
I don't. And again, this isn't said to upset I'm not trying to upset Latinos. This is said because I know my history. When I know that slave patrols were some sort of military-like-ish policing force that was going out and grabbing and disappearing people based upon their skin color. People were having to walk around and show their papers. Yeah, that is what it looks like.
Meantime, in an effort to attract Latino voters, Talarico has launched a Spanish language campaign on TV and social media. Up next, incumbent Senator JohnCornyn and Congressman Wesley Hunt discuss the state of the Republican primary for U.S. Senate when Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas returns. Welcome back to Eye on Politics. The Republican primary for U.S. Senate is one of the most closely watched contests, not only here in Texas, but also Washington, D.C. It's widely expected to end in a runoff election in late May. A poll this month from Emerson College Polling and Nexstar Media shows Attorney General Ken Paxton at 27%, incumbent Senator JohnCornyn at 26%, and Houston Congressman Wesley Hunt at 16%. 29% were undecided. Another independent poll last month showed similar results, but Cornyn was ahead of Paxton by 1 percentage point. Congressman Hunt campaigned in Dallas earlier this month. He spoke at the Dallas County Republican Party headquarters. I asked him about the latest poll and if he's approaching a now or never moment with early voting about 3 weeks away.
Well, that's just one poll. We've been performing way better. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten in this race. You would go back to even before the filing deadline, there were public polls that had us in the 20s at a minimum at 22. So I know where we're at. We're already a striking distance and we're doing very well. Also, I want to point out in that poll, it's 30% undecided. So when there's 30% undecided and you have two men that have ubiquitous name ID that have been on the ballot for decades, and yet there's still 30% that are undecided, that bodes very well for us, a candidate that people are looking for to actually fill that void and fill the rest of that space. I'll also point out, too, also on that poll, I outperformed both of them in the general election numbers against our Democrat opponents. So for a person that has not been as well known, whose name ID is in the high 70s, and I think once we get done with this over the course of the next few weeks, we'll be in the 80s and 90s, I think it's going to be a fait accompli, and we will absolutely be in the runoff.
So what is your message to Republican voters? What's your rationale?
I think Republican voters are looking for the next generation of leadership. The United States Senate is simply not a retirement community. And the fact of the matter is our vice president is 41 years old. Our Secretary of State is in his early 50s. Our Secretary of War is in his mid 40s. And what people want is the next generation of America First patriots that supported President Trump on day one, like myself. And what I also want to point out to the viewer at this moment is that I'm only going to do this for 2 terms. I'm already term limiting myself. I am giving up my congressional seat right now after serving 2 terms. I don't believe in doing this forever. I have a 7, I have a 5, and a 3-year-old at my house. And at some point, I need to get back and raise them as my parents raised me. People want term limits. People want us to get younger. People want leaders for the future to step into the race right now. And that's exactly what I'm hearing.
Everybody is expecting this to get into a runoff. You said so yourself. I mean, are the candidates, are all of you, in a sense, trying to keep the powder dry until you get to the runoff?
Not necessarily. I think we are up on TV as we speak. We are playing to win. We are working to win. But at the end of the day, I'm the only one that's traveling around the entire state of Texas to ensure that I actually face the voters and people could see how their next senator is going to behave and what we're going to do to save this great nation and keep this state red.
Senator Cornyn said this week you're not really a factor in this race.
Yeah, well, if I wasn't really a factor, he wouldn't have spent $5 million hitting me in my own home city of Houston.
Well, one of the things that he has started is a website tracking your lack of votes, that you missed votes, including one last week. And House GOP leadership is also telling Republicans such as yourself that missing votes should be a matter of life and death. And so I'm wondering, how do you justify going out on the campaign trail and missing votes?
The people of Texas want a new senator, and it is my job to make sure that the people of Texas know that that person is going to be me. I have now answered hundreds of questions on the campaign trail. And do you know how many questions I've got about missed votes? 0. Not a single voter has asked me about this issue. You know what they want? They want somebody that's not going to co-author gun control legislation. They want somebody that's going to support President Trump and codify his agenda in the halls of the Senate. You see, people will understand that the SAVE Act is sitting on the desk of the Senate. A lot of President Trump's agenda is not getting held up in the House. It's because they refuse to nuke the filibuster to get his agenda across. And people are looking for people like me that are willing to nuke the filibuster to ensure that we deliver on the mandate that the American people gave to President Trump.
But don't you run the risk, because on one hand, you said that you want to actually codify President Trump's agenda. How can you do that if you're not there in D.C. to vote?
Well, again, a lot of President Trump's agenda is being held up in the Senate. It's really interesting to see just how informed the voter is here in Texas. So we aren't worried about the House. They aren't worried about the House as much. I mean, what they do know is that this filibuster has been an issue. It's been an issue for months, and that's what's been holding up President Trump's agenda. It's actually in the Senate. I am running for the Senate to ensure that we can get President Trump's agenda through for the last 2 years of the Trump presidency. And so what they're willing to do is they're willing to trade me missing votes in the House of Representatives to know that they're going to have an America First fighter in the Senate.
Cornyn was in Dallas last week discussing the security for the FIFA World Cup games this summer. I asked Cornyn about the polls, the likely runoff, and the lack of an endorsement so far by President Trump.
Well, obviously, we'd like to see the poll numbers continue to get better, but what's going to happen, I expect to happen, is on March the 3rd, we will end up with a runoff between me and the Attorney General that won't be decided until May the 26th. I don't think Congressman Hunt has a credible path to victory, but he's determined to stick in there and force a runoff. And I'm proud of the fact we've been able to close the gap with the Attorney Generals, but I expect it to remain competitive. And unfortunately, it's going to be hard fought.
Do you think that the poll numbers, the way they are the reason that President Trump hasn't endorsed you, because you're not far ahead in the polls?
Yeah, I don't know. I talk to the president on a regular basis and have a good relationship with him, as you've seen, work with him consistently. But I think he probably doesn't want to disappoint some of his own supporters, who happens to be voting for one of the other 2 candidates. And so I hope he'll take another look at it after March 3rd and make a decision. If he doesn't, we can't wait around. We're just going to have to continue putting the pedal to the metal.
Ad Impact says 75% of all the ad money spent in Texas on this race is on your behalf. Mm-hmm. So what do you think it's going to take to get your numbers up if, with all that spending already taking place?
Well, I think you pointed out that in some of these polls, as many as 29% are undecided or don't know. I would say they probably don't care yet. They'll focus on the election the closer we get to the election.
What is your rationale to these Republican primary voters on why they should keep you in office?
Well, the things that they care most about, according to what they tell me, is they care about President Trump's success. And as you've seen, I've supported the president 99.3% of the time. Most of the most important legislative accomplishments of the Trump tenure in office, things like the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, things like the One Big Beautiful Bill I've been an integral part of. And then, of course, there are all the federal judiciary that have been so important, particularly the Supreme Court of the United States, that I've helped usher across the finish line. So I think many people don't know that, and so we're reminding them of that.
You've been very critical of Congressman Hunt's attendance record and his voting record.
It's shameful.
Why is that such a big deal? Because he told me that it's okay because people haven't asked him about it on the campaign trail. And he said he's more concerned about the votes in the Senate and the fact that the president's agenda is being held up, and that he says he supports eliminating the filibuster. What do you say to that?
Well, I can't believe he has the temerity to say showing up for work doesn't matter. And he's missed 90% of the votes that have occurred this year in the House of Representatives. I would recommend that you or others talk to the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who is trying to pass President Trump's agenda, and he doesn't have members who actually show up and are willing to vote. And that's a real problem. You can't claim to be pro-Trump and not show up for work. Mr. Hunt has become Mr. No-Show.
There are no debates, so how are you going to make your case against Attorney General Paxton?
Well, I don't know what will happen after the primary on March the 3rd. I'm happy to have a debate. So far, the Attorney General's been unwilling to answer hard questions in public about his record. And as you know, his record is one of corruption, betrayal of the Texas taxpayer, of his own staff who turned him into the FBI as whistleblowers and got a $6.6 million judgment against him. And he's betrayed his own family. I don't know how people think that they can trust him to be a United States Senator if he betrays everybody he deals with.
I wanted to ask you about this controversy over ICE that's ongoing and their enforcement actions. Obviously, there was the deadly shooting of Renee Good up in Minneapolis by the ICE officer. When I was speaking with Congresswoman Crockett, she compared ICE enforcement to slave patrols. What's your reaction to that?
That really, I hate to dignify that with any response, except to say it is completely unacceptable for elected officials to trash our law enforcement officials, whether it's the local police, our state law enforcement officers, or federal officers like ICE, from enforcing the laws that Congress itself has passed. And it's dangerous when you have people say we ought to defund the police, we ought to abolish ICE, and encouraging some of this non-compliance with lawful orders by law enforcement. What happened in Minneapolis was tragic, but that the woman involved should have complied with the officer's instructions, should have exited her vehicle, and shouldn't have used her vehicle as a weapon to threaten or assault a law enforcement officer. The only thing separating us from chaos and anarchy, really, is the rule of law.
Paxton isn't doing interviews with local Texas reporters and isn't publicly disclosing his campaign events. Coming up, why Republicans on Capitol Hill are holding former President Bill Clinton and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton in contempt of Congress. When Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas comes right back. On Capitol Hill, the House Oversight Committee voted to hold former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State and First Lady Hillary Clinton in contempt of Congress. It's related to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. Sarah Jenkins explains in the brief.
Both former President Bill Clinton and the former Secretary of State skipped their scheduled depositions last week, arguing that the subpoenas they received were, quote, invalid and legally unenforceable. The chairman of the House Oversight Committee, Representative Comer, argues that their testimony is critical as the panel not only continues to probe the Jeffrey Epstein case, but is also looking at ways to better address and fight sex trafficking. Comer said that no one is accusing Bill Clinton of any wrongdoing, but that the Clintons are unique and different simply because there is a record of the former president having a personal relationship with Epstein. If the House votes to refer the Clintons to the DOJ, contempt of Congress is a misdemeanor offense that carries up to 1 year in prison and fines as high as $100,000 for each charge if convicted. For The Brief, I'm Sarah Jenkins.
And don't forget, you can watch all the full interviews with Crockett, Cornyn, and Hunt on our CBS Texas YouTube page. And while you're there, please hit the subscribe button. And that's all for Eye on Politics this week. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Jack Fink. I am listening, and we are listening to you at CBS News Texas. And from all of us here, have a great day. See you next week.